Hey, everybody. So the good news about this episode is that we had special guest, the gaming historian, on. The not so great news is that it sounds like we recorded this episode in a large cave. We did our best to clean it up. I think it's a really good episode, so I hope you'll stick with us. If it's too much for you, please check out some of our other episodes. 1 semester of law school.
1 semester of criminal justice. 2 experts.
I'm Kristin Pitts.
I'm Brandi Egan. Let's go to court.
On this episode, I'll talk about Devin Moore, a man who shot and killed 3 people. Did Grand Theft Auto make him do it?
And I'll be talking about Daniel Petric, the 16-year-old boy who shot his parents over a video game.
This week, we have special guest Norman Caruso, the gaming historian. Welcome, Norm.
Hello, and I will be talking about the Atari Games versus Nintendo lawsuit, which focused on the very first unlicensed games for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
So I just want to start by thanking our special guest, Norman Caruso. He begged to be on the podcast.
I mean, since we've started this, he's been like, when are you going to let me be on? I want to be on so bad. I don't just want to... it's not enough for me to set up your audio equipment each week. I just want to be featured as a guest. Please.
Are people aware that I'm your husband, Kristin?
Okay, well, now they're going to... Here's the problem. Now they're going to be like, he slept his way to the top.
I slept my way onto this show.
Which is the only way to get on this show.
Guess so. Can't wait for future guests.
Stay tuned for Channing Tatum.
Recently divorced Channing Tatum.
My
so
sister,
it could be a possibility.
Yeah.
My sister sent me a text. Well, actually, no, she posted this on our Facebook page, and she was like, "Hey, you talked about how you love Channing Tatum, and now he's getting a divorce."
Yeah, it's clearly because he found out you're into him.
Yeah, clearly he's also a big fan. He's one of our 12 listeners.
Man, that's crazy.
No, we really do appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
Because as your wife and your business...
My wife.
As your wife and your business partner, I know firsthand how much you love being on very small podcasts that no one listens to.
So I guess I should explain what I do for the listeners that have no idea what I do.
Okay, you're giving me this look like I should have done it already, so I will do it. So the reason Norman is on this show right now is to promote his tiny little YouTube show.
Yeah.
No, Norman has an excellent YouTube show where he talks about big moments in video game history. He does documentary style videos that are really great. He just released an hour-long episode about Tetris, which is fascinating. He's been doing the show for, 10 years?
10 years, officially.
And that's why this episode is going to be dedicated to video game lawsuits.
I noticed both of you chose violent lawsuits.
Well, see, we established that I'm a fucking psychopath and love court cases that typically revolve around stabbings. I'm branching out a little bit today and doing a shooting.
Couldn't find a stabbing?
Yeah, no.
no stabbings in video games. Dang.
Brandi was Googling and so mad.
Yes, I was so pissed.
Stab and Nintendo. 0 results.
Aw, that sucks.
Yeah. And I don't always do the violent ones, but I enjoy a violent one.
Yeah, no, you usually balance me out with some more civil cases and stuff like that. Those are just not that interesting to me.
For some reason, when you said civil, I wasn't thinking like civil court. I was thinking like more civilized cases. And then it flashed in my head the, Insight boner pills one I did.
So what we do here, Kristin, is a court podcast.
What?
And a branch of the court system is civil court. And so when I said civil court, I meant lawsuits that are handled in civil court.
Ma'am, I do not like the way you're talking to me. I like to be dumb, but not have it pointed out that I'm being dumb. No, is there anything else we need to oh, we should plug the Blu-ray.
Yeah. So Norm also has a great Blu-ray out, Gaming Historian Volume 1. It's got stuff on it and things.
Wow.
It has 16 classic episodes, plus never before seen footage, stuff that you will never see uploaded to YouTube.
That's right.
And you can get it signed when you order it through our website, thegaminghistorian.com.
Kristin finally got the website right.
Brandi always has to correct me. I think it's because she's constantly going to the website.
Yes. Multiple times a day.
Lots of pictures on there. I understand. It's gaminghistorian.com.
No, it's
thegaminghistorian.com.
Either one works.
Oh!
Believe it or not,
Oh my God, here we
I
go.
actually created this website and I bought the domain names. It's weird how I know how to get to the website. How do I get to my own website? No, it's the Gaming Historian.
Okay. Wow. We have just been
to be
schooled
clear-
on our own fucking podcast.
To be clear, we're here doing this as a favor to you.
Oh,
As it turns
That's
out,
right.
we are not going to have a guest on this episode.
yeah, I'm leaving.
I am now going to
I'm
stab
going to
Norm
Chipotle.
and blame video games.
Yeah, I'm going to Chipotle. I don't have time for this.
Okay. It was early in the morning on June 7th, 2003. Fayette, Alabama. Police officers Arnold Strickland and James Crump spotted 18-year-old Devin Moore sleeping in a stolen car. So Officer Strickland goes over, he arrests the kid and takes him into the station on suspicion of grand theft auto. Not a huge deal. They run Devin through the system. They don't see anything on him. He's totally cooperative. Again, just not a big deal. So they take Devin to the station, and while they're there, they find out from the emergency dispatcher that a dry cleaning business near where Devin had been picked up had been burglarized. I think it had been burglarized that night. Mm-hmm. And at the scene of the crime, there was a shoe print. So they're like, okay, well,
If the shoe fits.
that's exactly what they said. So at this point, Officer Strickland and Devin are alone. And so, again, Devin's been totally cooperative this whole time. Officer Strickland uncuffs him and takes Devin's shoe to get a print of the shoe. That's when things went bad. Devin lunged for Strickland's gun, shot him in the head.
Oh my God.
So he got his gun?
Yeah.
Did he pull it out of a holster or?
The articles didn't say, but I mean, surely he must have had it undone.
It wasn't just like laying on the table.
I would hope not.
I'm going to lay my gun right.
Sign that says, "Please take me."
I'm going to go get this print done. I'm going to lay my gun right here.
Now,
and I'll be
don't
right
you
back.
touch it, Devin.
Don't touch the gun, Devin.
No, so, Devin shoots Officer Strickland, I think it was 3 times, once in the head. So obviously the other officer comes running down the hall. He hears this commotion. That was Officer James Crump. So I don't think he was prepared for Devin to be the one who had the gun because by the time Devin shot him, he didn't even have his gun out. He was totally unprepared. So then Devin starts running down the hall, and that's when he comes across emergency dispatcher Ace Mueller. He shoots him several times.
Oh my gosh.
Once in the head.
You really nailed the pronunciation of dispatcher. I'm pretty jealous.
Norm, I don't know if you've heard, but
I heard
has
Brandi
some
struggled.
I cannot
big
say.
time.
For
Yeah.
some reason, I have trouble
Dispatcher?
with that word.
Don't show off, Norm.
God.
She can say dispatch. She can
But
say...
the on the end
Yeah,
throws it all
it's
up.
just
Interesting.
Yeah.
She calls it the 911 call.
911 lady.
911 boy.
So he shoots 3 people. Again, this is a really small town, so he has just wiped out the night shift police force in this town.
Yeah.
In 1 minute.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we're talking boom, one guy, boom, the next, boom, the third one. In the course of all this, he takes one of their car keys and leaves the station with one shoe on. Okay. This is where I think it gets kind of weird. So he leaves the building. He realizes, oh shit, I forgot my shoe. He tries to go back into the building, but it's locked.
Yeah.
So, okay, now he's shoeless, which, I mean, priorities, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's a fire station that's attached to the police building. And so he comes across 2 firefighters. And he's like, hey guys, something bad happened out front there. You might want to check it out. Then he gets into the police cruiser and he drives off.
Oh my gosh.
With one shoe.
With one shoe.
Okay.
To me, I guess the crazy thing is like that killing sounds so cold-blooded and so out of nowhere, but then to like run into some firefighters and be like, hey guys, could you go check on that? That just seems weird to me.
Were the firefighters, did they like register that this is a civilian driving off in a
That's what I was
police
wondering.
cruiser?
I don't think they saw that.
Okay.
I really, there wasn't much info on that. It seems like I'm the only one who thought that was unusual. Because I saw that in like one place and then no one else mentioned it. So here's the crazy thing. He's driving away in a police cruiser, but he can hear the search for him going on over the police radio. And so anyway, they eventually caught up to him in a field. When they caught him, he said, life is like a video game. Everybody's got to die sometime.
Yeesh.
So
That's not necessarily true in video games, though.
and that's what the officer said.
You can beat it.
The officer pushed his glasses up his nose and was like,
Actually, Devin.
it depends on how good you are at video games.
Actually, Devin, I did a 5-minute speed run in Mario Brothers and I didn't die once. So do not at me.
So there goes your theory.
I'm just saying, Devin's quote is not accurate.
So that's your one problem with this story? With this triple murder?
Continue. What he did was wrong, but what he said was wrong.
Okay.
I'm not putting him on the same level, but just saying.
Okay.
You don't have to die in a video game.
Boy, I am so glad we have special guest gaming historian here.
Anyway, continue.
Okay, so obviously, when he said that got huge media attention. There was a lot of focus on just that line alone.
Yeah.
Because for quite a while, people had been talking about whether violent video games would promote violent behavior in real life. And so people kind of took that as, maybe it does.
Maybe it does.
Here's the proof. This kid said it, and he just killed 3 people.
Yeah. So that's exactly what Devin Moore's attorney wanted to argue in court. He wanted to say, look, Devin loved playing violent video games, and it created this script in his head so that when he was in that situation, he just did what he had been trained to do. So let's talk about his habits. Devin loved violent video games, specifically Duck Hunt. And that's
the most violent video game.
You couldn't say that with a straight face.
oh, come on, that was good.
No. I could see right through that.
Okay, fine. It was Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
So Devin loved Grand Theft Auto, specifically Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City. So let's talk for just a minute about these games. It's an open world. You can do a lot of bad shit, including Grand Theft Auto.
You can kill hookers.
Yep.
And get your money back from them.
Okay, now, hang on. I've got an issue with get your money back.
Yes.
Because if they perform a sex act on you and then you kill them and take the money, then you've robbed a sex worker. You didn't get your money back. No. If I go to Walmart right now and I'm like,
only took the $20 that they paid and left the rest of the money.
no, because she's provided a service to you.
All right.
Now, hold on. I'm serious. If I go to a store that I've shopped at before and I just take money, I'm like, I can't be like, I'm taking this back.
Yes, I understand. What if you were unsatisfied with the services rendered?
And then you killed the cashier.
I feel like again, the cashier has to give you the money back. Like, I'm sorry, we want to keep you as a customer. We want to keep doing sexy things to you.
All right.
Okay.
Carry on.
Let's see. So, yeah, like we were saying, you can do a bunch of bad stuff in Grand Theft Auto, including kill cops.
Yes.
And, of course, that was the thing that people really glommed onto. You can kill cops in this video game. So, like I said, at the trial...
Glommed onto?
Glom?
Did I
What's
use
glom?
that wrong?
I don't know.
What is glom?
I always thought it was like...
Glom?
Add on? No?
I've just never heard the word glom.
What if I just made it up?
I hope you did.
It's a very cromulent word.
Shut up. Okay. So at the trial, the defense wanted to present this argument that Grand Theft Auto, coupled with PTSD from his abusive childhood, basically programmed Devin to kill. So a little bit about his childhood. His mom had a drug problem for a lot of when he was growing up. He bounced around different foster systems. Are you laughing at this?
I'm laughing at Norm who just burped into the microphone.
I know.
It didn't pick it up on audio. It's fine.
My goodness.
He warned us that that's what he was going to do.
Yeah,
When I grabbed the Coke, I was like, I'm going to burp into the mic during the podcast.
I thought you were joking.
I was burping, but the mic didn't pick it up. It's fine.
It's fine, Kristin. It's fine.
Brandi just saw my facial.
I tried to ignore. It looked like you were a little volcano over there. Okay, so
Sorry, back to his horrible childhood.
Yeah,
this person
that we
who
were
went
all
on
laughing
to
at.
murder 3 people.
Yes. So Devin, his mom had a drug problem for a lot of his childhood. He was in different foster homes. There's some controversy over his relationship with his dad. Some people said his dad was a very strict disciplinarian, and other people were like, well, it kind of crossed that line from strict discipline into just abuse.
Abuse, yeah.
So anyway, the defense attorney wanted to argue this was scripted behavior. These games plus the childhood put him into a dissociative state where he couldn't tell what was real and what was fake. But they were not allowed to use this defense in court. They wanted to, but the court was like, nah. And I think part of the reason why the judge didn't allow it was because there weren't enough scientific studies linking video games to violent behavior.
Right.
So, you can't really use that.
What year is this again?
I think this was 2003.
Yeah.
That was like during the height of Grand Theft Auto
Yeah.
controversy. It was a very, very popular game at the time.
So the defense was like, okay, we'll have to roll with this. We can't mention the video games, but he definitely had PTSD. So the prosecution, though, so Devin pled not guilty by reason of mental defect. The prosecution argued that Devin wasn't insane, that he knew what he was doing, and then District Attorney Chris McCool told the jury, he's not crazy, he's just mean.
Wow.
It's quite the argument.
He's just mean.
He's just mean.
What?
So the jury deliberated for 1 hour, and they agreed with the prosecution. There was no mental defect, and they sentenced him to death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kill 2
Kill
law
cop,
enforcement
yeah.
officers and a dispatcher,
Yeah.
And it's Alabama.
And it's Alabama. You're going to get the death penalty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of, I don't feel good about that, but I don't think it's surprising.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you may be wondering how the victims' families felt about all this, like how they felt about this idea that video games played a role in this shooting. They actually wanted video game companies to be held responsible for what happened.
Wow.
They agreed with it. So the day after the verdict came down in this case, they teamed up and filed a $600 million civil suit against Grand Theft Auto manufacturer Take-Two Interactive, Sony, Walmart, and GameStop.
Now, is this you said this is a civil suit?
I know you've never heard of this before, Brandi. It was a civil suit. We'll put definitions in the show notes. So they included Walmart and GameStop because apparently those were 2 places where he had bought the Grand Theft Auto games.
Walmart sold Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah.
I thought that
They always have.
were like one of the, I thought that was part of their, like, we don't sell, I don't know, stuff over a certain rating or.
They don't sell adult-only rated games.
Okay.
They sell rated M. Grand Theft Auto is rated M for mature.
Okay.
And I think that was part of the argument is, so M for mature, that's 17 and over, right?
Correct.
So I think Devin was under 17 when he bought some of these games. And so, that was part of the argument. Okay. Now this is going to get real fun. Representing the families was Florida attorney / activist Jack Thompson.
Oh, boy.
Do you know anything about Jack Thompson?
Oh, he's a lunatic.
No.
But anyway, continue.
Hey, don't spoil it. No spoilers.
So,
This guy,
he's a real-life Looney Tune.
he is, he's really something. So let's talk about him. He was a lawyer and anti-video game violence activist, but he was anti a lot of other things too, including being nice. So I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories about him because there's a ton of stories you could tell, but this one I think says so much. So let's see here. In 1988, he ran for state attorney against Janet Reno. And Janet Reno, of course, later became, I think she was the first female attorney general of the United States. So Jack Thompson was not a fan of Janet Reno. He said she was way too liberal, blah, blah, blah. So they're running against each other. And one day, before one of their debates, he passed her a note.
Was it like folded up?
That is
into,
exactly
like,
how I imagine it.
Like,
yes, yes.
Do you like me? Check yes or no.
Okay, it's so funny you say that. Let me tell you what this note said. So you gave her a check one note? Okay. The note said, I, Janet Reno, am a check one, homosexual, bisexual, heterosexual. Yeah.
What did she check?
Then it said,
Did she check anything?
then it said, if you do not respond by and such date, then you will be deemed to have checked one of the first two boxes.
Oh my God. That's like harassment.
Yeah, he's a total douche.
Oh my God.
So that's what he did. So what do you think Janet did? Norm, you think she responded?
Probably not.
Checked?
Did she bring it to the attention of
That's
the
what I was
media?
gonna say. She probably, yeah.
Here's what she did. She went over to him, put her hand on his shoulder, and goes, I'm only attracted to virile men, which is why I'm not attracted to you.
Wow. Got him.
But now here's my favorite part. Guess what he does back? He sued her for battery.
What?
For putting her hand on him.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
So he sues her for battery. And he goes on, I think it was like Nightline or some news show, and he goes, she grabbed a hold of me and shook me. She didn't hurt me, but I was annoyed.
Oh my God.
I was annoyed.
I was annoyed.
I got really annoyed by she didn't hurt me. Because I feel like if you're trying to make a case.
It's not battery then.
Yeah.
And
Kristen annoys me a lot. I can't just sue her every time she annoys me, though.
please do. Take all my money.
Suing my wife. She annoyed me.
No, but I just feel like he wanted to make it clear that he was not harmed by a woman in any way.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So Janet Reno, of course, was like, I think this issue should be investigated. Go ahead and figure out. Get to the bottom of it. Did I do something wrong here? And of course they were like, no, you didn't. Jack Thompson, we see you. This was clearly just a political ploy. Shut up forever.
Shut up forever.
So Janet won the election. How do you think Jack took that loss?
Not well.
No, not great. A few years later, Janet Reno was on the board of a nonprofit called Switchboard of Miami. And I think it's basically like a crisis hotline. You know, you call in and they'll refer you to different social services programs. So Jack came out and said that the group was placing homosexual education tapes in schools.
What?
Yeah, this guy.
Like homosexual education, like how to be a homosexual?
I assume. Which
Or
I don't know
like
what.
educational tapes with a homosexual theme. Like Joey has two moms.
Why does Joey have two moms?
I like to think that it was just graphic porn.
Yeah, just hardcore gay porn.
Let him know. It's an educational
That's
thing.
what I hope it was.
Oh,
know what I'm saying?
So at this point, it was getting so ridiculous that the Florida Bar Association made him take a mental exam.
I love that.
But he passed.
Oh,
so
dang.
then he went around and bragged that he was the only certified sane lawyer in Florida.
No, of course he did.
That's good marketing.
Yeah. So we're closing in on this time where he starts to get obsessed with video games. But it started with music. Sexy music.
Sexy music.
Okay, do you guys remember the song Me So Horny?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I listened to it a lot yesterday.
And that song gets like in your head.
It's because it's very repetitive.
Yes.
And I gotta say, it is stupid. I copied down some of the lyrics. I'm like a dog in heat, a freak without warning. I have an appetite for sex, 'cause me so horny. So this was by Two Life Crew. Jack Thompson was not a fan. And he said that their album violated obscenity laws. And I gotta say, it was pretty gross. He also went after Madonna and Ice-T. But then in 1997, he shifted his attention to video games.
Because he wasn't getting any attention for his music lawsuits.
I assume because they weren't successful.
Yeah.
He was getting a lot of attention.
So people were just like, tell him to shut up. And now
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
moving on to the next entertainment medium.
And he saw an opening for this. In Kentucky in 1997, there was a school shooting. And during the investigation, they found that the killer played a lot of violent video games. So that kind of started this ball rolling. They did the same thing with Columbine, right?
Columbine, they played Doom. Played a lot of Doom.
Yeah.
So Jack Thompson represented the victims' parents and sued a ton of different video game companies during that thing. Nintendo, Sega, Sony, amongst others. And his logic was these games convinced the killer to disregard human life. But the lawsuit got dismissed. But here's the thing. When they dismissed that lawsuit, the court didn't specifically say, hey, you can't do this because video games are protected by the First Amendment. So since they didn't say that, I guess the lesson there was kind of like, okay, find a new way to attack video games and your lawsuit might work next time.
Left an opening for him.
Yeah. So he kept trying, but his cases kept getting dismissed. Story of his life. Then the Devin Moore case comes up, the one I started talking about in the beginning with the triple murder. So
Thanks
this
for
case,
reminding us.
Yeah, who's Devin?
Now, what did he do?
I hate you both.
This was the case I originally brought up.
You know what I hate about you guys? You're both very similar, and so
Let me
having a
remind
clone.
you who Devin was.
Hey, why don't you burp into the mic? So anyway, Devin Moore, who I spoke about in the beginning.
Oh, yes, Devin.
So Jack Thompson is all in on this $600 million civil suit. He's
I bet.
very excited.
Yeah.
So he goes on 60 Minutes. And
Oh, my God.
I'm going to read a quote because this is the quotes from this guy, pure gold. Here's what he told 60 Minutes. What we're saying is Devin Moore was, in effect, trained to do what he did. He was given a murder simulator. He bought it as a minor. He played hundreds of hours, which is primarily a cop-killing game. It's our theory that we think we can prove to a jury in Alabama that but for the video game training, he would not have done what he did. Brandi is laughing at but for. She's holding it in.
I
Put so much emphasis on
but for. Yeah, I thought that was a weird.
Wait, so I'm the bad guy?
Yeah,
here?
but the way you said it was but for. You're like but for.
But see, you've got to put the emphasis on it because then it'll sound weird, right?
You just say but for. But for. But you're like but for.
We're never having a guest on this podcast again.
Guess not.
Okay, so anyway, then he said, The video game industry gave him a cranial menu that popped up in the blink of the eye. Oh, shit. The video game industry gave him a cranial menu that popped up in the blink of an eye in that police station. And that menu offered him the split-second decision to kill the officers, shoot them in the head, flee in the police car, just as the game itself had trained him to do. So, Norman, I've got a question for you.
All right.
He calls Grand Theft Auto primarily a cop-killing game.
Yeah.
Is it?
No.
Yeah,
not at all.
That's my impression, too. Like, that's ridiculous.
Can you do it in the game? Yes. Are there consequences for doing it? Yes, there are. But the primary goal of Grand Theft Auto is not to kill cops.
Yeah, I mean, that's what struck me,
Yeah.
amongst other things about this quote, is it just seems like total bullshit.
What really
Yeah.
struck me
It's almost you could make the same argument that Super Mario Brothers is a turtle killing game.
right.
You can stomp on Koopa Troopa turtles in Super Mario Brothers.
Is that why I'm always killing turtles?
I see dead turtles everywhere around this house.
You have been trained.
You've been trained
become a turtle
by
killing
Super Mario
machine.
World.
It's a murder
stomp on
simulator,
turtles.
is what it is.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
And it's also why I'm always eating mushrooms.
By the way, I think PETA had a huge
No.
campaign against Mario for that reason. Not just killing turtles, but like he wears the Tanuki suit, and they're like Mario wears fur.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Anyway, well, we can talk about that later. Continue with Looney Bin,
Okay.
Bugs Bunny, the lawyer.
It gets even worse from here. Okay.
Ain't I a stinker?
Okay.
Yeah, this guy's nuts.
So they have the 60 Minutes episode, but that was not enough attention. So he starts churning out press releases, and they were fucking nuts. In one, he pointed out that in some areas of Japan, you can't sell Grand Theft Auto to minors, but that Sony has no problem, and I'm quoting here, dumping this garbage into American kids' brains.
Oh, God.
He called it Pearl Harbor 2.
Holy shit.
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, he made it sound really fun.
Pearl Harbor 2.
Can you fucking believe that?
Because he blamed Sony. Sony is a Japanese company. He was like, "Oh
Yeah,
my
so
god,
let's
that's
dive
horrible."
into that. I mean, it's stupid for so many reasons. One of them, it's like, okay, yeah, in certain areas of Japan, they won't allow that game to be sold to minors. Sony, a Japanese company, sells the game in the United States. Those two things are not related in any way. It's like
No.
he's acting like something that happens in Japan and a company that's based in Japan, they're all the same.
Right.
Yeah, that's...
And he's also under the assumption that Sony is somehow involved in the development of Grand Theft Auto, which is not true.
Right.
It's developed by Rockstar, and it was published by Take-Two. It was licensed to Sony for their console, but it's not like Sony was actively marketing Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
No, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's stupid on
It's
so
dumb.
many reasons.
Yeah.
It is.
It seems like he understands about half of what is going on, which is the Kristin Pitt story. So, people were pretty offended by that Pearl Harbor 2 Electric Boogaloo comment.
Yes.
So
Why did
Jack-
he add Electric Boogaloo on
I
there?
don't know. I guess he thought more people would pay attention.
Yeah.
So Jack apologized. Just kidding.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
No, he doubled down. So someone from the media called him up and was like, "Hey, dude,
About that comment.
about that Pearl Harbor thing," and he doubled down and he was like, "No, they dump pornography and violent video games into our country." And he called it a, quote, slow motion version of Pearl Harbor.
Holy shit.
So obviously the video game industry was like, this guy is nuts. You can't trust him. Jack actually brought that up in his press release, and he was like, Take-Two Interactive is, quote, the most reckless video game company in the world. He said that them accusing him of being unethical was like, quote, a nuclear bomb calling a cap gun explosive. So,
Wow.
yeah. The lawyer for Sony and Take-Two went to the judge in the case and was like, please take this douchebag off the case.
Just dismiss the case in general.
Well, they wanted that too. But he was like, this Jack guy is going to turn the courtroom into a circus. Please stop this. Jack tried to fight back, but eventually he like swooped in heroically and was like, you know what? This case is not about me. This is about the victims' families, and I don't want to insert myself. I'm going to withdraw myself from this case. And then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on. So the judge was like, no, you can't withdraw from this case because I'm kicking you off this case. That judge wrote an 18-page letter criticizing Jack's behavior and then temporarily barred him from practicing law in Alabama.
Wow.
So there was a lot of back and forth after this, but you get the gist.
Yeah.
Jack's a bucket of sunshine, and the judge is like, we've had enough sunshine.
Yeah.
Goodbye. It's a little hard to figure out exactly what happened from here on out, mostly because once Jack was gone, the media circus kind of died down.
Yeah.
But what is clear is that the video game makers moved to dismiss the case. They were like, look, at the time of the sale, it wasn't illegal to sell these games to minors. And they really wanted to argue, like, this is protected by the First Amendment. Come on. And the judge was like, no, we're not going to dismiss this case. There's still some stuff to be decided here. That decision went all the way to the Alabama Supreme Court, and the court affirmed the lower court's decision. We're not going to dismiss on these grounds that you're bringing up. I did find an article by Kotaku that said that eventually this case was dismissed, but it was on the grounds that Jack failed to file several key documents correctly. So, wrapping up here, where are they now? Devin Moore appealed the death penalty decision, but they upheld it in a 5-0 vote. He is currently on death row. Jack Thompson is permanently disbarred in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Video games, thanks to a 2011 Supreme Court decision, are protected speech under the First Amendment, just like basically any other form of media.
Yeah.
In the decision, Antonin Scalia wrote, like the protected books, plays, and movies that preceded them, video games communicate ideas and even social messages through many familiar literary devices, such as characters, dialogue, plot, and music, and through features distinctive to the medium, such as the player's interaction with the virtual world. That suffices to confer First Amendment protection. But for. No, he didn't add that.
But for.
So,
Yeah.
I'm curious about your guys' thought on, did Grand Theft Auto make him do it?
No.
No.
No. Yeah.
No.
To me, it's like, it sounds like he had an exceptionally rough childhood.
Yeah.
It is interesting to me, like, do violent images play a role or desensitize you in some way? I can see maybe that. But I don't see that being, like, the tipping point for murdering 3 people.
No, I agree.
Millions of people play Grand Theft Auto. And it's not like there's millions of people running around murdering people and be like, well, I played Grand Theft Auto.
Well,
caused me to do it.
And to be fair, that's not what his lawyer argued. His lawyer argued it was the PTSD, it was the childhood plus the video games. So
I agree that he probably has some mental issues.
I
Yeah,
think so.
but
They were probably present without the game.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, yeah, if you have mental issues, maybe combining that with a violent video game, maybe you don't fully understand that it is just a video game. But
Whoa, did you just change sides?
no, I'm just saying, like, people with mental health issues.
Yeah.
Shouldn't play video games?
No.
You heard it here first from the gaming historian.
Like, people that suffer from, I know I've talked to people that suffer from anxiety. They can't play games where you're like jumping very high in the air on platforms because it gives them anxiety that, I'm gonna fall, and that scares me.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe there's
But that doesn't make
there.
them do anything.
It doesn't
in real
make them be
life.
like, that doesn't make them do anything in real life.
Okay.
Listen, I just look back on my own life and I'm like, hey, I'm I've played a lot of violent video games. I'm okay.
But Brandi and I were talking about this last week. We were talking about that episode of The Walking Dead. And okay, so I guess spoiler alert, but this is several seasons back. So if you're this far behind, then I don't know.
It's your own fucking fault.
Yeah. So do you remember when we watched the episode of The Walking Dead where Negan comes out and Negan murders Glenn?
Fucking bashes his head.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was horrified by that. I was super affected. I was shaking. I was just like, I could not get that out of my head for days. And I remember talking to you about it, and you started laughing. You were like, man, I guess I have just played too many video games because that did not affect me at all.
That's true, because, I've seen worse stuff in video games and in movies and stuff, and I was just like, I didn't think about it for days.
Yeah, to me, it made
I was just like, ooh, that's
my
violent.
mom, who doesn't play video games at all, quit watching the show over that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
It was the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, I was like, oh no, Glenn's dead. But I didn't think about how he died at all.
See, so I wonder if maybe it
There
does
has to be like some
desensitize you a little.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could see that.
That
Definitely.
also explains why you keep bashing people's heads in.
Yeah.
Mystery solved.
She's got eyeballs popping out all over the place.
Oh, God.
So gross.
Yeah. I definitely think it's worth studying more, because I feel like there's no conclusive evidence either way. So
I think it's interesting what this says about us, because our cases are very similar.
Really?
You'll see, yes.
Okay.
and mine has nothing to do with violence at all.
Okay, I'm excited for
Yeah,
yours.
I'm ready. Let's take a little break from the violence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you throw in a stabbing, though?
Yeah,
just for
I
fun.
just really like stabbing.
And then Mario stabbed Luigi. Okay. So my case is about Atari games versus Nintendo. This was a big lawsuit in the late 80s, early 90s. This was when Nintendo was dominating the video game industry after it had been proclaimed dead.
Okay.
The video game industry had been proclaimed dead?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm going to take you back to the early 80s. Let's go back to 1982, 1983. This is when Atari was like the number one video game company. Atari 2600, like Pong and Pac-Man, Yar's Revenge, all these E.T., all these were like really popular Atari games.
Pac-Man's an Atari game?
They ported it to the Atari. It's not an Atari game, but
Okay.
Atari had a version of Pac-Man that sold a ton of copies. So the video game industry was it was a very new entertainment medium. And so everybody wanted to cash in on it. So Atari was number one, but then you had the ColecoVision. You had Mattel had a video game system called the Intellivision. You had the Fairchild Channel F. Radio Shack had a Pong clone. Sears had a freaking video game system, the department store. So you had all these video game systems, and there was no like company regulation over it. So like Purina Dog Chow made a video game.
No. No.
It was like a mail-in.
Did you get it free with your dog
If you bought, if you like mailed in rebates of your dog chow, it was called Chase the Chuck Wagon.
Oh my god!
Which is part of their marketing, where like the little chuck wagon goes and the dog follows it. So yeah, there was a game about like cleaning your teeth by some like dental organization, I'm pretty sure. So all these just games everywhere, no regulation on if they're good or not.
Yeah.
So tons of consoles, tons of games, and basically consumers got burnt out by it. There's just too much. We don't know what's good. We don't know what's bad. The personal computer comes out. And they're pretty competitively priced. So they're like, why would you buy a video game system when I can buy a computer and I can do all this extra stuff?
Right.
So the video game industry in 1983 in North America, it crashes. So games that were like $40 are now like $4.
Wow.
Consoles that were $150 are like $30 now. And Atari loses a ton of money. By the end of 1983, they lose $539 million.
Oh my God.
Oh my god.
They lay off 700 employees in 1984. So basically, Atari is owned by Warner Communications, which is a massive, entertainment conglomerate. And the president of Warner, Steve Ross, he's like, okay, video games are dead. Let's pull the plug. So he splits Atari into two. So he splits Atari into the Atari Corporation and then Atari Games. So Atari Corporation handles consumer products, personal computers, video game consoles, and Atari Games handles software, the arcade games. So basically hardware and software.
Yeah.
So he's like, we're going to split the company and we're going to sell them to the highest bidder because we want to make the most money. The Commodore Computer Company, which was a very popular computer in the 80s, they buy the Atari Corporation. So they get access to all of Atari. Did you know Atari made personal computers?
I did
in the 80s?
not.
No.
Yes. So Atari made personal computers.
Did you know that, Kristin?
No, I just like that he called us ladies.
I didn't say
He
ladies.
said in the 80s.
Oh, I thought he said ladies.
Now, ladies, did you know?
I thought it was so weird. I was like, I don't think I've ever heard him say that.
Hey, ladies, did you know? That's why I started Game and Historian, to pick up women. Anyway. So,
Work it out.
Work it out.
Yeah.
the
Oh, he's not wanting to answer that question.
this is somewhat of a long story, so I wanna get through it. That's all.
Keep fucking moving. Is what he said.
Yeah.
No time to talk about his conquests.
So many
It's
ladies.
not because there weren't any.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Hey, we know there was one. You were it.
She's in this room.
She's here. Talking into the mic.
So the founder of Commodore, Jack Tramiel, he buys the Atari Corporation. He's not interested in video games. So he just buys the Atari Corporation, even though he could have bought Atari Games for like nothing. But he's like, video games are a dead fad. Why would I buy this? So Atari Games is sold to a Japanese company called Namco. You familiar with Namco?
No.
They developed Pac-Man.
Oh, okay.
They developed Galaga. So some pretty popular games back then. Still popular today, actually. So Masaya Nakamura, who is the owner of Namco, he buys Atari Games for $10 million. So suddenly he has the rights to all of these classic Atari licenses and arcade games. It was actually a good move because the video game crash happened only in North America. In Japan, video games were still booming.
Big, yeah.
Masaya Nakamura gives Atari Games to his underling named Hideyuki Nakajima. He previously ran Atari of Japan. Okay, so he has a connection here. So back in the 70s, he was put in charge of Atari Japan. But Atari Japan was basically a huge failure. They did not make a lot of money. Employees were stealing from them. It was a huge disaster. So Atari Japan was sold to Namco, and then Namco buys Atari Games like 10 years later.
Whoa, weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, Nakajima says, okay, we need to make Atari Games profitable again. So he lays off some people. He freezes all employee raises. And the other thing is he wants to get into video games again. But as I said earlier, Atari was split in two. The Atari Corporation that was given to Commodore, they owned the consumer portion of Atari. So Atari Games couldn't just like make video games and say, these are Atari games. So they made a subsidiary called Tengen.
Okay.
So they sold video games under this company called Tengen. Okay. And at this point, it is 1986.
It's a good year.
Great year.
I was born that year.
Do we have 85, 86, 87?
Yeah, I'm 87.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Explains why I'm so much more mature than you guys. This explains why I say but for and you guys just giggle.
So Hideyuki Nakajima. What? So this dude running Atari Games / Tengen wants to get into video games, and in 1986, the Nintendo Entertainment System is the #1 selling video game console in North America. Nintendo brought over the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985, where everyone thought video games were dead because of that huge crash, and they revitalized the industry basically on their own. So everyone wanted a Nintendo Entertainment System. Video games were back. So Atari Games wants to sell games on the Nintendo Entertainment System under Tengen. But Nintendo has very strict licensing policies. You know, they didn't want to make the same mistakes that Atari did. They didn't want a cat food company making a Nintendo game.
Yeah.
So you have to get permission from Nintendo to make a game on their console. And they had some really strict demands. So some of their demands were like a company can only make 5 games a year because they didn't want to overload the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to buy the cartridges from Nintendo. A minimum order of 10,000 cartridges.
Wow.
So
Now, was that just to make money, or
it was kind of both.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nintendo controls the product, and they make money from the companies that want to make games for their system.
Sure.
When you're the #1 video game company and you have like 90% market share, you can kind of do
get
whatever
to make
you want.
the rules. Yeah.
Yeah. Nintendo also had very strict censorship, so you couldn't have blood in your game, you couldn't have religious symbols in your game because they wanted to make it family friendly. The other thing Nintendo did was they had some lockout technology. So to prevent these random companies from making games for their system, they put in a lockout chip in the Nintendo Entertainment System. So how it worked was there was a lockout chip in the Nintendo, and then there was a lockout chip in the game cartridge. And when those chips communicated, it let the game play.
Okay.
So if some random company made a game,
And they wouldn't include that chip, so the game
they wouldn't include
play.
the chip, right?
Yeah.
So the chip and the program that communicated with those chips was copyrighted.
Okay.
Okay?
That's pretty smart.
That is really smart.
Yeah. I will say that some companies did find ways around some of their licensing things. So, you know, you can only make 5 games a year deal.
Would they create like a new company?
They would create a
name?
subsidiary and be like, oh, we're not Konami. We have another company called Ultra.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of fun little subsidiaries back then, so they can make more games. So Nakajima, the head of Tengen, does not like this licensing agreement. And he goes to Nintendo president Minoru Arakawa, and he goes, hey, we're Atari Games. We were like a
we're
big deal
legit.
back then.
We're
We're Atari. Give us a better licensing deal. We want to make games for Nintendo. But Nintendo of America says, no, we have to treat everybody the same. It's not fair if we give people special treatment. So Atari Games is like, well, all right, we'll become a Nintendo licensee. And they release 3 games as an official licensee. So they release Gauntlet, Pac-Man, and RBI Baseball. And the other thing that happens is Nakajima and Nintendo of America president Minoru Arakawa, they become friends, and they hang out a lot together, and they go to dinner together, they play golf, and Minoru Arakawa noticed that Nakajima kept asking him questions like, hey, how much money do you make on this licensing? Like, how do you control retailers, blah, blah, like a lot of insider information. Well, behind closed doors, Atari Games, again, they don't like this licensing deal. They are trying to find a way to get around the lockout chip in the Nintendo console.
Oh shit! Was this a fake friendship?
He was a spy.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
Spy.
Yeah. So there's engineers at Atari that are trying to get around this lockout chip. That's the #1 reason they can't go rogue and go on their own. This lockout chip is preventing them.
Gotcha.
So they try to reverse engineer it, and it's not working. One of the COOs of Atari Games hated this licensing program Nintendo had. He said the way Nintendo did business was like Ford introducing a car that could only use Ford gasoline. So you can imagine having a Ford car, you had to go to a Ford store and get your gas. Again, Atari Games wants to go rogue. Their lawyers read over the licensing agreement. The only way you can make games for the NES legally, getting around the licensing agreement, is you have to be able to get around that lockout chip. They can't reverse engineer it. They've given up. They know the program is copyrighted, so they come up with a plan.
So there is no legal way to go around the lockout chip then?
If you reverse engineer the lockout chip legally, you can.
Oh, so you just have to be smart enough.
Right.
Okay.
The program's copyrighted. They can't crack the code. So they go to the copyright office. And, well, here's the deal with copyrighted material. You can go and look at copyrighted material. You can look at it, but you can't take pictures of it. You can't take notes on it. You can just look at it. There's one exception to that rule, though. If you, if the material is the subject of litigation, you can take pictures and take notes.
Oh my gosh!
Because it's part of like the discovery process, right? Okay.
So lawyers for Atari Games go to the copyright office and they lie. And they say, we're being sued by Nintendo. We need a copy of the lockout chip program.
Shit.
So they walk in and they get it.
Oh my gosh.
So they take.
That is so messed up.
That is.
Yeah, they just lied. So all of a sudden they have the program and they make a clone of the lockout chip and they name their clone the Rabbit. That's the code name, Rabbit chip. So they put it in their unlicensed game, and it works. And so they have found a way around the licensing agreement.
Wow.
So
when you started this, I thought they were going to send some guy with a great memory in there and just
Exactly. Yes.
yeah. Now that'd be an idea.
Yeah, the photographic memory.
So they have a way around the lockout chip. They haven't done anything with it yet, though. So now we're in 1988, and there is an industry-wide chip shortage. All electronics, there's a chip shortage. There's just so many new electronics coming out, and there's just not enough chips to go around. That includes video games. So because Nintendo controls all the manufacturing, they can basically tell companies, we're only going to make X amount of your game because we don't have enough chips. And so this pisses off Atari Games even more because they're like, you're preventing us from making money.
Yeah.
So they decide in December of 1988 to sue Nintendo for antitrust violations and unfair competition for $100 million.
Oh, Jesus.
At the very same time they do this, they release their unlicensed games to retail stores.
oh my God.
Wow.
So
Was that like look over here at this thing, and then we're gonna slide out these
basically.
games?
Or it could have just been like a 1-2 punch, like, and here's a lawsuit, and here's our unlicensed games. Okay.
Wow.
So you all know what a Nintendo cartridge looks like. It's the gray cartridge.
Yeah.
Well, the Tengen cartridges looked very similar, but they were completely black. And it said, Tengen on it. And it had a little seal of approval, like the Tengen seal of approval.
So kind of like the Nintendo.
Yeah, kind of like the Nintendo seal of approval. It is the Tengen. These were the very first unlicensed games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Because Nintendo, again, was super... They didn't want another video game crash, so they wanted to control everything.
Yeah.
So this was the very first crop of unlicensed games. And they were actually pretty good. Tengen put out some pretty good games on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
It'd be a shame if they didn't after all that.
One of my favorites is Rolling Thunder. Great arcade game that was ported to the NES. And again, here's another interesting thing. Sega, Nintendo's big rival back in the day, Sega licensed some of their games to Tengen. So there are some Sega games you can play on the Nintendo Entertainment System, like Afterburner.
Wow.
Which is really weird to think about. So Nintendo finds out about this lawsuit at their 1988 Christmas party.
Oh.
At the party, they get a call that they're being sued by Atari Games.
Oh, jeez.
So they contact Nintendo of Japan, who is, daddy, basically.
You just had to work out a way to say daddy.
I had to find a way to say daddy.
Yeah.
Nintendo's main headquarters are in Japan. So their president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, says...
Daddy.
Big Daddy Yamauchi says to Nintendo of America, you need to stomp this in the butt right now. Into the butt for. Stomp the butt for right now. Okay? He's like, we are not going to have another video game crash. You need to get rid of these unlicensed games and, crush them like the little buggies they are. Make daddy happy.
Ew.
Okay.
It's funny. We were on board with everything until make daddy happy. Okay. That is the grossest thing you've ever said.
So Nakajima and Arakawa, they were best buds. They golfed together and dinner together. They meet to discuss the lawsuit. Whoa. And Nakajima says, look, I'll withdraw the lawsuit. Just let us make our own games. Let us manufacture our games. And Nintendo of America is like, no. No way.
I don't blame them.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, you don't get to sue me and then do this other shady thing. Yeah, no.
So Atari Games goes to the media and says Nintendo is purposely creating a chip shortage in order to keep prices high and control the retail market.
Which, that's not true, is it?
It's not true. There was an industry-wide chip shortage.
Yeah.
And Nintendo denied the claim and said it was absolute nonsense. Nintendo Vice President Howard Lincoln was like, I am going to destroy Atari Games. He started off as their lawyer, and he was a badass lawyer. He's a really good lawyer. Vietnam veteran, great lawyer. Later would run the Seattle Mariners. That's a whole other story.
All right.
He said it was a total betrayal on Atari Games' part because they had that initial licensing agreement, and they even released games, and now they were suing and releasing unlicensed games. So he goes, you have no idea what you have taken on. A tiger who will skin you piece by piece.
Damn.
He's mad. Okay. So Nintendo in February of 1989, so 2 months later, Nintendo countersues Atari Games and says they entered the licensing deal fraudulently. They got technical support, they got detailed information about retailers, and they only entered the licensing agreement so they could make their unlicensed games.
Yep.
And they sued Tengen for the unauthorized and unsupported games on the NES and patent infringement on their lockout chip because they're like, how the hell is this working?
Yeah.
And they found out. They went to the Copyright Office and were like, we're being sued, which was a complete lie.
How did they find out? Do you know?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
But they found out.
Yeah.
So they took all of these allegations and countersuits and they just put it into one case. And actually, the media was rooting for Atari Games, believe it or not.
Why?
Because this was American media, right?
This is the American media.
And Atari had been an American company, right?
It was really more about creating a more open industry. They said if Atari...
Well, because then you could have more games, cheaper games.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Dennis Lynch from the Chicago Tribune had a quote. He said, if the makers of hardware had veto power over what software gets made, consumers would suffer. Fewer programs would be available, and they would certainly cost more. So he's
just
at
what I exactly said. More games, cheaper games.
Brandi was on point.
And way more concise.
Which is a fair point, but I also see Nintendo's side of you don't want things to go crazy and you have another video game crash where people are making all this crazy stuff for your system.
I think that's kind of the point for me is I feel like you can't really compare it to just any other industry unless there was a similar crash in that industry.
You really somewhere in the middle is where this needs to land, where you can have more games, cheaper games, but the quality of those games is kept intact.
Yeah.
And it definitely is that way today. There's a nice little medium.
Yeah.
But back then, Nintendo was super strict. Okay, so Nintendo employs a strategy of intimidation outside the courtroom. So they go to all these retailers and they're like, yo, if you're selling Tengen products, we're going to cut you off from our Nintendo stuff.
Wow.
And some of these retailers... 50% of their sales were Nintendo.
Well, I was going to say that's going to make up a much larger percentage of their sales.
Yeah, so it's too risky. A lot of retailers, they're like, okay, it's too risky to sell these Atari games.
Yeah, totally not worth it.
So, Toys R Us, Walmart, Target, and Circus World. Don't know if you remember Circus World.
Not at
No.
all.
Old toy store. They all stopped selling the Tengen games because Nintendo basically threatened them.
Wow.
Well, Atari Games goes to the court and they say Nintendo's threatening our customers.
Yeah.
Which, so the Judge Fern Smith, who's overseen the entire case, says, yeah, you can't interfere with each other's customers. So Atari Games is still allowed to sell their unlicensed games, and Nintendo can't threaten retailers. Okay. Despite all of this going on, Atari Games was making a lot of money on their unlicensed games. Their sales were up by 40% thanks to this. So they were having a good old time.
Yeah.
But now comes the actual court case. So it all boils down to that rabbit chip that Tengen made. And the question was it an exact copy of the lockout chip that Nintendo made? Like, could they prove that they actually stole it from the copyright office?
Yeah. Okay.
Atari Games argued that the only reason they took the documents from the Copyright Office was because it was crazy to think that someone could reverse engineer a chip just by, like you said, having a good memory and like memorize.
Right.
Because reverse engineering is fair use. That has been determined to be fair use.
Okay.
If you want to reverse engineer an electronic device.
Okay.
They felt they were entitled to self-help. Okay. And they also claimed the documents they took weren't important anyway because they had already reverse engineered
Then
shit.
why did you need them?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what Judge Fern Smith thought.
Yeah. That
Here
doesn't make sense.
Here was the killer though. So the copyright on Nintendo's chip was dated 1985. But in 1987, they actually updated the chip. So they deleted some unnecessary code in the chip in 1987. But the copyright was from 1985. The Tengen Rabbit chip had code from the 1985 version. So that proved they didn't reverse engineer the chip.
Yep.
That they just blatantly.
They blatantly took the copyright.
Wow.
Nintendo also, when they made the 10NES chip, they purposely added garbage code to it that doesn't do anything. It's just simply there to prove if somebody copies
Yeah.
it, you know.
Oh, that's so smart.
Well, the Rabbit chip had the garbage code.
Yes.
So it was very clear to Judge Fern Smith that the Rabbit chip was a direct copy of the 10NES lockout chip, and she ordered Atari Games to immediately cease producing, distributing, and selling their unlicensed Nintendo games. And they had to recall all their product currently on store shelves. And she also criticized the company for their actions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they got a little talking to in court.
Like a finger wagging.
Atari Games would appeal, and they said, look, if you shut down Tengen, we're going to have to lay off all of our employees. There'll be a huge financial impact. And Judge Fern Smith was like, she actually agreed with them. She said it would be a huge financial burden on them. So they remained on store shelves for a little bit longer. And finally, and Atari Games appealed, of course. In 1992, it went to the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., and they finally ruled that they had to cease production on all those games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is so ridiculous.
Yeah. So the appeals court agreed with Judge Fern Smith's original decision. Atari Games had stolen the code. They ordered them to stop making and selling their unauthorized game cartridges. So after 4 years of litigation, it was finally over. But while all this was happening, Atari Games made a deal with Sega to make games for their console, the Sega Genesis, which was new and upcoming.
Yeah.
And they actually had a licensing deal with Sega. They didn't make unlicensed games for them. Sega had
How
a
nice of them.
had a very favorable licensing deal as opposed to Nintendo. The problem was this whole legal battle really opened up other legal battles with Nintendo. So do you remember when Commodore bought Atari Corporation? Like back when Atari was split in two?
Yeah.
So Jack Tramiel, who bought them, He also sues Nintendo for $250 million for antitrust violations.
Wow.
Okay. He claimed that Nintendo's practice of console exclusivity for 2 years prevented Atari from getting good games. So here's what happens. Jack Tramiel, you know how I was like, he wasn't interested in video games? Well, then Nintendo comes, the video game industry booms again.
Yeah. He's like,
He wants back in.
Like, oh, wait, no, I want in.
He wants in.
Let me back in the pool.
He goes to these companies and he's like, hey, will you make games for our system? And they're like, no, we have a deal with Nintendo.
Yeah.
And it's a 2-year exclusivity deal.
Yeah.
So if a company makes a game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, they can't make it for another system for 2 years, which is crazy.
God,
Crazy
Nintendo
good deal
was
for Nintendo.
So smart.
But the case is ultimately dismissed, and Atari never really gets back into the video game industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this also opens up the Federal Trade Commission to investigate Nintendo because they're getting so many antitrust lawsuits. So Representative Dennis Eckhart of Ohio, he urges the Justice Department to look into Nintendo for unreasonable tactics to restrain competitors. So this leads to an investigation by the FTC. The FTC and Nintendo decide to settle, which was good news for Nintendo. They had to, well, they didn't have to, but their agreement was, Nintendo was like, okay, well, maybe we were kind of like monopolistic. So we're going to send out coupons to anyone that bought a Nintendo product between 1988 and 1990.
Wait, is this the Today in History episode?
Yeah.
Okay, as part of that agreement, Nintendo admitted no wrongdoing.
Nintendo admits no wrongdoing, which is true.
Way to get him, Kristin.
I thought it was such a crazy good deal for Nintendo because they admit no wrongdoing.
Internally, they knew.
Well, of course they
Yes.
did.
I mean,
Which is what I
down
meant.
inside, Kristin.
Deep down, they knew.
Well, anytime you're giving up to $25 million in rebates, you know you did something.
Well, the
shitty.
crazy thing is they send out $5 coupons to people that bought Nintendo products from 1988 to 1990. So it's basically like, well, if you bought a product, you get $5 off your next Nintendo purchase. So they basically made more money.
No kidding.
But they also, before all this, Nintendo basically set the prices for their games, consoles, accessories, anything. And if stores didn't sell them at that price, Nintendo threatened them. Well, after the FTC investigated, Nintendo told retailers, you can sell our products at whatever price you want, which makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the suggested retail price.
Basically,
suggested.
Nintendo didn't want people to think their product was cheapened. So if Toys R Us was like, we're having a blowout deal on the Nintendo Entertainment System, it might make Nintendo look bad.
What did the Nintendo Entertainment System originally retail for?
The suggested retail price was $159.99, which in today, adjusted for inflation, it's about $320.
Okay.
So fairly expensive for what it was.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up in a nice little bow. Okay. So in Japan, Namco, who remember bought Atari games way back when, they had a nice little licensing deal with Nintendo in Japan only. This is when Nintendo first released their console, and so they wanted people to make games for their system. So Namco had a exclusive licensing deal with Nintendo, which gave them very favorable treatment. Well, they had to renew their license. So Namco's president, Masaya Nakamura, he meets with Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi, and he's like, hey, let's get a new deal going.
Yeah.
Well, after all this went down, Yamauchi was pissed about what Atari Games did.
Yeah.
So he's like, no, you don't get a favorable licensing deal. You have to
not.
do what everybody else does. So Masaya Nakamura of Namco is super pissed. So he calls out Nintendo publicly for their monopolistic practices. And then he declares that we're not going to make games for Nintendo anymore. We're going to make games for the Sega Genesis. So that happened. And then Atari Games continues to make games for the Sega Genesis. In 1994, Time Warner Warner Communications.
Yeah.
Right.
Time Warner still owned a share of Atari Games. They basically fold the company into a new company they call Time Warner Interactive. So Atari Games is no more. Tengen is no more. Hideyuki Nakajima battles lung cancer and passes away in 1994. But, a lot of people see him as like... Nintendo obviously saw him as a bad guy, but him bringing this, battle up really ended Nintendo's crazy licensing policies and monopolistic practices. So you could argue that what he did was a good thing.
Yeah, there's not just one way to look at it.
Did he and the Nintendo guy stay friends?
Minoru Arakawa? Probably not. I can't imagine they went golfing after that.
Yeah.
So that is my case. Atari Games versus Nintendo. The whole stealing the program.
Yeah.
Or we're being sued. We need a copy.
Yeah.
That's
pretty
so
crazy.
And actually, the Copyright Office changed their policy after this.
Well, yeah, you can't just come in and say you're being sued.
Right. So now you have to present proof you're being sued.
Imagine
you can't just walk in. Yeah. You can't,
Crazy concept.
you can't just walk in and be like, I'm being sued. I need access to every copyrighted material.
Man. The 80s.
Oh, God.
Crazy
that was
stuff.
really good. I thought that was super interesting.
It was good. And I loved that Nintendo put garbage code.
I know.
Yeah,
it's like
so
that
smart.
whole paper towns thing. Like, old cartographers, so map makers, would put in these fake towns on maps. And then that is how they knew if somebody copied their map. If that fake town then appeared on another map, that was proof that that person had copied their map.
Yep. Still a practice today in most programming.
Yeah.
Programmers will usually put in like comments or just code that doesn't do anything. All right.
We're ready to get back in this?
Let's do it. Brandi's case.
Okay, so of course, we have this episode. We're going to have a guest on. We need a video game themed case. And I, of course, had to find one that involved murder because, as previously mentioned, I'm a psychopath. So
I like how Norman and I didn't try to correct you or anything. We're like, well, there you go.
Okay. In October of 2007, Daniel Petric was a 16-year-old boy living with his parents, Susan and Mark, in Wellington, Ohio. Mark Petric was a minister at the New Life Assembly of God in Wellington, and as such, he objected to Daniel playing video games with violent themes and adult ratings.
Okay. So a religious family?
Yes.
I would imagine.
Very good, Norm.
Very good.
Okay.
So even though his parents objected to these games, Daniel would play them at his friend's house, and he was even known to
Naughty Daniel.
Naughty. So he even was caught multiple times sneaking out of his house at night to go buy these games that he liked and then sneak them back in the house.
He was caught multiple times.
Doing this.
Good grief.
Mark, his father, would later testify that Daniel did this multiple times, and when he would discover the games, he would destroy them.
Oh.
So, okay, this next part, we're just fucking barely into this thing, and I'm going to be like, well, I'm not sure about this. This timeline here is a little bit confusing. There's not that much information available about this case, but...
Okay.
So sometime in late 2006 or early 2007, Daniel contracted a staph infection, and he became housebound. During that time, Daniel became obsessed with the game Halo 3. So Halo 3 is a violent game, I guess. I think you shoot...
First-person shooter.
Shoot aliens, right?
Shoot aliens. Takes place in space.
In space. Yeah.
Very popular video game franchise.
Thank you for that commercial.
I'm not endorsing it. I'm just stating the facts.
He would play reportedly up to 18 hours at a time without breaking to eat or sleep.
Now that is a gamer.
Yeah.
Mad respect.
Mad respect for Daniel there.
Eventually, his mother, Susan, caught him playing and informed...
Well, I would expect so.
Yeah.
18 hours.
How do you hide that for 18 hours?
So,
Mom, don't come in. Don't come in. Mom, no way.
So she informed her husband, and this led Mark to taking the game away. This time though, for whatever reason, he did not destroy the game. He locked it up in his safe that also held his 9mm Taurus PT-92 handgun.
Uh-oh.
Well, maybe he wanted to play some Halo.
So it's interesting that you say that, because in multiple articles that I read about this, it's mentioned that was Daniel's belief, that his dad took
wanted
the
to
game
play
and he was going to play it. And so this was something that was grating on him. Like, I'm not getting to play this game, and my dad is going to play this game.
Do you think there was any truth to that?
No, not at all.
I doubt his dad wanted to play. But it is weird he didn't destroy it this time.
Yeah.
That is weird.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Maybe want to play some Halo.
Yeah.
Maybe he Halo is kind of a, angel religious thing. It's like the Halo,
Yeah,
Maybe he was like, maybe it's a religious game.
Brandi, do you know what a Halo is? Norm, for our listeners who don't know what Halos are.
But 4.
So Daniel, by all accounts, is beside himself. Days went by, and he grew more and more angry. His lawyer would later argue that by this time he was exhibiting signs of withdrawal from
So he was addicted to Halo 3.
From a video game addiction. Yes. Then, on October 20th, approximately 1 week after his parents had confiscated his game, Daniel stole his father's keys, used them to unlock the safe, and from it, he took his Halo 3 game and his father's handgun.
Oh, no.
He then walked up behind his parents, who were relaxing on the couch in the living room watching TV. And as he walked up behind them, he said, "Close your eyes. I have a surprise for you."
What?
Daniel then proceeded to shoot both of his parents. He shot his mother in the head, arms, and chest, and she died almost immediately. Then he shot his father in the head. Miraculously, his father survived and later described the moment his son shot him. So he said, Daniel walked up behind him, said, "Close your eyes, I have a surprise for you." And he was expecting, some kind of pleasant surprise. And instead, he heard the bang. He felt his head go numb, and then he saw blood pouring down over from his skull. He then remembered Daniel saying, "Hey, Dad, here's your gun. Take it," as he's placing the gun into his dad's hand. Daniel was attempting to make the scene look like a murder-suicide.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That is so fucked up.
Yeah, super fucked up. Just minutes after the shooting, Heidi and Andrew Archer, Daniel's sister and her husband, came to the door, as they had plans to watch the Cleveland Indians ALCS game against the Boston Red Sox. Boston Red Sox won 12-2, by the way.
Thank you for that detail.
So in the article I read, it just said a baseball game, and I was like, October 20th, that would have been a postseason game. I'm like, I wonder
There'd
who they
only
were
be
into.
one game,
Yeah.
These are things I would have never looked into.
So the part of Ohio that they lived in was just 20 minutes outside of Cleveland. So
that makes sense.
Big Indians fans. Mm-hmm. So Daniel goes to the door and he attempts to keep them from entering the house by saying, you should leave. Mom and Dad are fighting. It's been really bad.
Did he
don't
know
come
that they
in.
were coming over, you think?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's not clear to me. I would think that he maybe would have picked a different time had he known.
Yeah.
So as this exchange is going on at the door and he's trying to get them to leave, the sister hears groaning and moaning in the background, and she pushes through and finds this grisly scene in the living room. Her mom is dead, her dad is bleeding, and he's barely alive.
Oh my God.
And so she calls 911. Daniel, meantime, runs out the front door, gets in the family van, and takes off. He takes with him only his Halo 3 video game.
Oh my
fucking
God.
Yes, puts it in the passenger seat.
Oh my God.
Yes. Takes nothing else with him. Yeah. This is how
This reminds me of I saw some TLC special of people in love with inanimate objects.
Oh,
Maybe he was legit in love with Halo 3.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So police pursue him, and they were able to stop him at a roadblock a short time later.
Yeah.
As he's taken into custody, he yells, "My dad shot my mom." So he's still trying to like sell this murder-suicide thing. Mark ends up in a coma for like 3 days, and somehow he survives and like fully recovers from a fucking gunshot to the head. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a minister, so maybe he had like a, direct line to God, and God was
Mark to God.
Mark to God.
Help me out here.
Come in, God.
Help me out, buddy.
Yeah. So following this shooting, Microsoft, the owner of the intellectual property for the game, refused to comment other than saying, "We're aware of the situation and it's a tragic case." That's the
I
only
don't
statement
blame them.
What else do you say? Yeah.
Yeah, what else do you say? Yeah.
Our game's that good. I mean, that's
It's great to hear someone is so passionate about Halo 3.
Please leave us a review.
Yeah. In the stores now, Halo 3.
No, our game is so good you'll shoot your parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, God.
No, I think they definitely made the right call saying nothing.
So. Daniel was charged with aggravated murder, aggravated attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. So the tampering with evidence is because he put the gun in his father's hand, If convicted, he faced a sentence of life in prison. He was 16 at the time, so he was too young for the death penalty.
Okay.
God, I forgot he was only 16.
Yes.
This is crazy.
Yeah. This is interesting. Daniel waived his right to a jury.
Juror.
Juror.
The rural juror.
Daniel waived his right to a jury trial and put his fate in the hands of Lorain County Judge James Burge. So his trial only appeared before the judge.
Wow. Did he think he could like woo the judge over? Like,
I think
such a charming boy.
I think his attorney's theory was like, this is a topic like, because their argument is similar to the case that we talked about
video
earlier.
games caused them to do this.
This is a topic that is so polarizing that if we just maybe have one judge who's looking at this and we don't have to have 12 jurors who we don't know what stance they will take on that, we have a better chance.
I would think having a jury would be better, though.
I don't. I think juries can be so emotional.
I agree.
And a case where you've
killed your mom.
Parents, I wouldn't do a jury.
Yeah.
I didn't know if maybe there would be a tactic of like, such polarizing opinions. Maybe it would be a hung jury?
Yeah, mistrial.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the lawyer probably knows better than I do.
Well,
Hey, on this podcast, we're very confident.
So his murder trial began December 15th, 2008. So a little more than a year later, about 14 months later. Daniel's sister and father both testified, as well as one of Daniel's friends. Heidi, the sister, told the court that Daniel had become addicted to video games during that time, that he had become housebound due to the staph infection. Okay, so here's the note here. One article said that it was a jet ski accident. One article said that it was a snowboarding accident. So who fucking knows? He was either out there shredding some waves or killing some fresh powder, and he ended up housebound for close to a year.
Killing fresh powder.
Bottom line, he had a staph infection.
That's right.
Okay.
He had a staph infection, and apparently he was some sort of, sportsman.
Okay.
All right.
Mark testified that he and his son had a great relationship, but that he had put his foot down when Daniel wanted to play the Halo video games. It had become so heated that he told his son to leave the house if he could not give up the game. And at that time, Daniel left the house and spent the weekend with a friend. That friend was Jonathan Johnson.
Did Jonathan have Halo 3?
Yes.
He did.
Of course he did.
Johnson is the friend that testified at trial, and he testified that it was during that weekend when he stayed at his house for the weekend after getting in the argument with his family that Daniel marathoned the game, playing it for up to 18 hours straight with no breaks, no food, no sleeping, nothing.
Can
Now,
you imagine having someone over at your house doing that?
That's a certifiable addiction to something. I love video games, obviously, but I couldn't. There's no game I could play for 18 hours straight.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a...
Well, no, because you're putting aside your basic human needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an addiction.
I for sure agree.
Yep.
This marathon weekend was roughly 1 week before the murder and attempted murder.
Yeah, yeah.
Only one person died, I guess. Just one. He only murdered one parent.
Everyone back off.
Yes. Daniel's defense attorney, James Kersey, argued that due to the enormous amount of stress put on him by his severe infection, Daniel was more susceptible to being influenced by the game. I feel like this is a really tough thing to argue because there's no fucking science behind that whatsoever.
Yeah.
The stress of the infection?
The stress of the infection led him to be more susceptible to the influence of the game.
Okay, so in a way...
Maybe they're like, because he was housebound. He needed entertainment. And when the entertainment was taken away from him, it stressed him out unbelievably.
Well, and, in those times in your life when you're really sick, everything kind of falls by the wayside.
Right.
So I kind of...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but that's not a valid argument for murdering somebody.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I can see being upset about it, but not
and it's a
murdering.
hell of a statement to make when you have nothing to back it up. You have no case studies, no science of any kind to back it up. I mean, you can just say whatever the fuck you want, but you have to have something to back it up. So he also argued that Daniel was not in the right state of mind to understand the finality of shooting his parents. He said that he had been playing the game so long that he did not comprehend the fact that death was real and permanent. Because if you die in a game, you just start it back up and it starts over.
Come on.
I don't know. I can't see anyone believing that.
Yeah, I can't either. Especially, so he was 16?
16.
That's old enough to understand
Yeah.
death.
Yeah.
And that, in Halo, you're shooting space aliens using these fake weapons, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's way off base. Whatever.
The prosecuting attorney disagreed. And he said that not only did Daniel show no remorse for his actions, that he had the forethought to, steal the keys, steal the guns, and then set up the shooting as a murder-suicide. So,
Yeah, he thought about it.
This was something he thought through.
Yeah. He was like, I'll set up as a murder-suicide, then I'll get to play Halo 3 all I want.
Exactly. So I wasn't able to find, my understanding is that the case only went on for a few days, but then the judge sat with it for several days before even maybe a couple of weeks before he made a judgment on it, because he didn't make a judgment on it until January of 2009. So this was being argued in December, and then in January he came back with his verdict. What do you think his verdict was?
Guilty.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. He found Daniel guilty. And then 6 months later, everybody was back in court for sentencing. So on June 15th, the sentencing hearing was held. Daniel's father, Mark, spoke to the court and asked the judge for leniency. And this is what he said. He said, "I know without any doubt he has severe regret, remorse, and guilt for what he did to his mother and I that evening. He's not a throwaway kid. He does have a conscience. Danny can set an example for other young people not to get involved and do the things that he did. And I believe he can do that. He still doesn't understand why he did something so terrible. He has severe regret, guilt and remorse, which I think he said twice, but
Hey, it's worth saying twice.
right. I see the pain in his eyes. He's sorry for causing everyone so much terrible pain. And like he had to stop multiple times during that statement because he was super emotional. And this was reportedly like the only time Daniel got emotional in court. Because during the whole trial, all the testimony, he wasn't emotional at all. Mm-hmm. And then he was like visibly shaken and crying during his father's like statement to the court. Petric's attorney told the judge that his client was blinded by the reality of the finality of shooting someone due to the video games. So it's kind of what the argument was before. Like, you know, he was so entwined in this video game world that he didn't understand that what he was doing was reality and final. And then he asked the judge to impose the minimum sentence. His final statement was, the addiction and withdrawal from video games to young men who have hormones raging in their systems is exactly what caused Danny Petric to do what he did. I don't really understand that argument. I don't know what the raging hormones have.
Listen, let me tell you about my raging hormones.
Yeah. Tell us all about it, Norm.
I've got nothing. I just think that's silly.
I think that's a crazy, weird thing to say.
Yeah.
Hormones. Ugh.
Yeah. Anthony Sillo, an assistant Lorain County attorney, so he's the prosecuting attorney on this case, he said Daniel Petric deserved the maximum sentence and had already received a break because he was under 18 years old at the time of the crimes and was ineligible for the death penalty. So he's like, look, this kid already got a break. Yeah. Where he's already getting off too easy, so we need to impose the maximum sentence. Daniel was given an opportunity to speak to the judge on his own behalf prior to sentencing, but he had become so emotional during his father's statement that he was unable to compose himself enough to do so. Like, he even like rose as if he had planned to speak, but he was crying so hard that he ended up sitting back down without saying anything, and the hearing continued on. Mm-hmm. Before imposing his sentence, Burge addressed the court. So this is what the judge said. He said, I feel confident that if there were no such thing as violent video games, I wouldn't know Daniel Petric. In my opinion, Daniel Petric isn't the same young man that he was on the evening he attempted to kill both of his parents. And he will be a different human being, I'm certain, 20 years from now. What do you think about that, Kristin?
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't agree with that at all.
I think it's a really interesting statement, and he addressed the court after he imposed his sentence, and I'll read you what he said there in just a minute, but he definitely has a view on the video games influencing violent crime. So ultimately, Judge Burge sentenced Daniel to 20 years to life for aggravated murder, 10 years for attempted aggravated murder, and 5 years for tampering with evidence, all to be served concurrently. He was also given a 3-year firearms specification, which will be served consecutively to the 20-year term. So he will be eligible for parole after 23 years. That is the minimum sentence allowed by Ohio state law. So he got the minimum.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think a jury would have done that.
I don't either. I don't think a jury would have done that at all.
No. Jury would have done life without parole.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree. Okay, so this is the opinion that the judge gave after handing down his sentence. And I think this is interesting. I also think it's fucking crazy.
Okay.
The court must enter a finding of guilty on the counts set forth in the indictment. That being said, it's my firm belief as a human being and not as a jurist that Daniel does suffer from a serious defect of the mind. This court's opinion is that we don't know enough about these video games. In this particular case, Not so much the violence of the game, because I believe in the Halo 3, what it amounts to is a contest to see who can kill the most aliens. But it is my firm belief that after a while, the same psychological responses occur in the ingestion of some drugs. And I believe that an addiction to these games can do the same thing. The dopamine surge, the stimulus, the same as an addiction, such that when you stop, your brain won't stand for it. The other dangerous things about these games, in my opinion, is that when these changes occur, they occur in an environment that is delusional. Because you can shoot these aliens and they're there again the next day. You have to shoot them again. And I firmly believe that Daniel Petric had no idea at the time he hatched this plot that if he killed his parents, they would be dead forever.
Give me a break.
I can't agree with that. I can agree with the addiction stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
I completely agree with that. Yes. Do I believe that you can become addicted to it?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yep. You can become addicted to running.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, the whole like, he thought if he shot his parents, they would come back to life. It's
I
like,
don't agree with that at all.
he did not think that.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all.
That's unreal to
It
me.
is. It really is. And so this is kind of what we were talking about earlier when, like, this judge, if there would have been science to back up this argument, he reportedly said, like, if he could have found him not guilty by reason of insanity, if there was science to back that up,
He would have.
He would have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like,
What's odd is if he claimed there wasn't enough scientific evidence, like, how could he make a judgment himself then?
exactly.
How could he be like, I think there is,
Well, so that's
I'm
just
going to
it.
rule on it?
But no, that's just it. That's
Yeah.
what he said. You know, he said, I believe that this is true. But as the judge, I have to say, yes, that he is guilty on this indictment for these reasons. But I'm going to sentence him to the minimum.
The minimum, because this is what I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just stunned.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one final question.
Okay.
As we wrap this case up. So here's my question. Were Daniel's parents right? Was he influenced to commit this horrible crime by the violence of these video games? Or was he driven to commit these crimes by overprotective, oppressive parents? Would the result have been the same had the game not been taken away?
No.
I feel like
Absolutely not.
I'm going to disagree. I feel like if you're the type to murder someone, you're probably going to do it. The circumstances can change. Maybe it's because they took away Halo 3 one day. Maybe it's because they grounded you the next day. But I kind of feel like if you've got that in you, you'll probably do it at some point.
But would he have done it to his parents?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I think he probably had some, like...
I think anyone that murders somebody, there's definitely something
in them that makes them capable of doing that. But I think in this particular situation, speaking not as a parent,
Yeah.
but I think their over-aggressive need to censor what he was seeing, I think led to them being the target of that rage that he had.
right.
And not the exposure to the video game that they feared so much would have some horrible influence on him.
You do wonder, like, what if he was addicted to Super Mario Brothers instead of Halo 3? Would he have? Do you think he would have still murdered his parents?
Yeah.
Because their argument,
I do.
yeah, because their argument was, well, the game was violent, and so it made him,
Yeah, and their
have these
argument
thoughts to
wasn't
do it.
against all video games because
Right.
they allowed him to have a video game console. Yeah. They were against specifically violent video games.
Yeah, see, I feel like he was driven to kill more by, like, entitlement and rage and
Yeah.
And not the exposure to the violence of the video game.
No.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm curious about what his home life was really like.
Yeah.
Sure. Was there
I'd
abuse?
love to know more.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm thinking about with my case was obviously Devin Moore had a really, really
Who's
tough...
Devin Moore?
Yeah. Wait, you already went over your case? I thought you were up next.
You know what? This is going to be the trigger for me.
Oh, no.
I played some violent games in my day.
Oh, boy. On the next, let's go to court. We're live at the Kansas City courthouse.
Aladdin for the Super Nintendo. They're going to look into that game. They're going to be like, so she kicked them both and she expected them to like fade out for a few seconds and then reappear?
Yeah. She's addicted.
No, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So Devin Moore had a really messed up childhood. And yeah, it's just hard for me to believe that someone would totally snap like your guy after a totally normal childhood.
The stuff that I read, it didn't go a lot into his childhood, but his father was very supportive of him, even after everything, completely forgave him. His sister was very supportive of him, and so...
Man, I'm thinking if one of my family members did that, I don't think I'd be like... I don't think I'd stand behind him.
His church family stood behind him.
See, and again,
I couldn't
think that's
do it.
weird.
Yeah.
I kind of think it's weird.
If my brother or sister murdered somebody,
Murdered your mom.
Yeah,
not
murdered
just
my
somebody,
mom.
your mom.
Your mom
Yeah.
and tried to shoot your dad. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think I'd be like, leniency on them. I'd be like, no, give them the max.
I'm trying to put myself into it, and I think that I would try to maintain a relationship, but I agree. I wouldn't be like,
I think as a direct family member, you should definitely.
I just thought of this.
Hang.
what?
It is easier to accept, to say, hey, have some leniency on my child. This wasn't them that did this. This was the horrible video games. So that you free yourself from that belief that your child could have just done this.
You blame it on something else. Yeah.
No shit. How have we not thought about this? Yes, and of course, it's easier on everybody.
Absolutely.
Might be one of the driving reasons like people blame forms of media for like these horrible things. It's an easy target.
It frees you. It frees you from so many things, including did I do a bad job raising this kid?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This wasn't my kid. This was this video game addiction, this exposure to my kid. No, judge, I need leniency for my perfect baby boy. This is not what he did. This is the horrible violence of video games.
Yep.
And he can tell people, in the future how horrible these things are. I think that's 100% it.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Case closed.
Yeah, that's it. Solved. Stamp it. Do they stamp those? Case solved?
They should.
Yeah.
I feel like the video games are evil argument comes up every few years, and we'll continue to have it come up every few years.
I'm surprised you haven't brought up the point that I've heard you make before about how these violent video games are everywhere, internationally.
Yeah. Oh,
Take
yeah.
it
Let's.
away,
Yeah. So one thing that is interesting is people like recently Donald Trump blamed violent video games for the Parkland shooting in Florida. He said these violent video games are giving these kids these ideas, but these video games are sold internationally. Every country, pretty much every country has access to these games. Why aren't these horrible things happening in other countries?
Right.
In Japan, there are some...
Because they have stronger gun control.
Well, and if you thought games were crazy and weird in North America, go to Japan.
Yeah.
There's some even weirder crazy stuff coming out of Japan. And they don't have these horrible, mass shootings.
Yeah.
And, they don't blame video games for these horrible tragedies. So, it's... I don't know. Like I said, every few years it comes up in the news. Fox News a few years ago There's a game called Mass Effect that had you could form relationships with characters and you could have sex with them, like if you fell in love in the game. And Fox News like went nuts about it, like, oh my God, you can have sex in a video game. You don't see anything. It's just you can tell the characters are gonna have sex. And they
went nuts in what way? Like they were really mad about it?
Yeah, they couldn't believe there was a sex scene in a video game. And it's like, do you watch movies? Do you watch TV? Like, what is the big deal
Sims have been doing that for years.
I know, I was gonna say, they heard
you didn't know your Sims can have sex.
And I guess I just don't understand the outrage over that. I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
When you did the hot coffee episode.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto, the hot coffee modification.
The guy that made the hot coffee mod so the characters can have sex, his quote about why do people care more about sex in a video game than the violence in a video game? I feel like one is like between consensual adults and the other is like you're literally murdering somebody. Yeah.
By the way, if you want to know more about that episode, you can order the Blu-ray
Gaming Historian Volume 1 and available at
thegaminghistorian.com
or gaminghistorian.com. I just found out today you can go to my website from 2 different URLs.
You know what? You're not invited to lunch with us anymore.
No, please, I'm hungry. This podcast has been going on forever.
I liked
did
having
too.
a guest. I mean, we won't invite this particular guest back.
Yeah.
But
I liked having a theme.
Yeah.
It was cool to have a theme.
fun.
It's fun to have a theme.
Next week, clowns.
No!
Brandy's afraid
I'm
of clowns.
So am I. Legit, I have a fear of clowns.
Okay, did you guys both watch it as children?
No, mine does not come from it.
I didn't watch it because I was afraid of clowns.
Mine comes from Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Ooh,
this
yeah.
horrible B horror movie. But I saw it when I was like
Too young.
4 or 5. Yes.
What?
And the fucking clowns wrap people in cotton candy and suck their blood out.
Ew!
Wasn't there but weren't there a bunch of clowns complaining that it caused like the downfall of their careers?
Why
Okay.
are you pointing to me for
Because
that?
you told me about this.
Oh, I don't remember that. Maybe.
Kristin, weren't you really pissed that your clown career didn't take off because of it?
Kristen's clown career ended because of it.
I had a reality show lined up on E. I had everything, and then that movie was re-released.
I think clowns are just creepy.
fucking
they're
super
creepy.
creepy. I mean, maybe back in the day when there was less entertainment, I guess it would be
I have
cool to
this
see a dude in makeup with a big red
I have this
nose.
super vivid memory of my parents. So my dad and my mom. So I was young because they got divorced when I was, I don't know, like 4 or 5. And so they took me to the Shrine Circus and they wanted me to take my picture with a clown.
Clown
and
Central.
like the clown was going to like hold me or something. I just remember I have this vivid memory of just like screaming my head off.
Heck
Like while they wanted
no.
me to take my picture
Get
with
this
this clown.
Creepy clown,
Yeah.
perv daddy away from me.
Perv daddy.
Okay, now, am I making this up? I feel like one time when we were pretty young, we were at the mall.
And a clown followed us
Yes.
around the mall?
Yes!
Yes!
A clown followed you?
I remember Brandi was losing her
Yes!
shit.
I'd be losing my shit too.
Yes.
Why was he following you?
Because he's a fucking clown.
No,
He's
it's a creepy ass fucking clown. Okay, here's something interesting. Hate clowns, love balloon animals. So I learned to make balloon animals.
Balloon? You separated them from the clown.
That's right.
Even though clowns are primarily responsible for balloon animals.
Sometimes you've got to separate the
That's
art
right.
from the
That's
artist.
right. I had to learn how to make my own balloon
I do like
animals.
balloon animals. They're
Well, yeah.
pretty cool.
There's
Who
no-
doesn't like balloon animals?
I don't know. Hate to know that person.
I know.
If you take away a balloon animal from Brandi, she might commit a horrible violent act.
Okay, I just pictured...
Brandi was addicted to balloon animals.
No, I just pictured Brandi jumping into her car with only the balloon animal.
it's sitting in the passenger seat. Yeah.
I buckled in.
Like, she leaves her purse and everything behind, but she's got the balloon animal.
Man,
Oh, gosh.
Well, Norm, I hope this was fun for you.
this was entertaining.
Yeah,
yes.
thank you for
Okay.
being our first and only guest ever on
You're welcome.
Before you came over, Brandi, I'm just going to be honest. I was like, but Norm, come on, are you kind of excited? Like to, be around us? And he goes, I see you two losers every week.
Yeah, you guys come over every week, so.
Well, technically, I don't come over.
I was going to say, you can just come here for me, Kristin. You don't actually live here.
I'm kicking Kristin out.
We have a very strained marriage.
Join us next week
When we'll be experts
Yeah,
on...
what are we talking about
Shut
this
up.
week? What are we talking about next week?
Norman, you're
y'all?
not invited.
Oh. I got to set up the mics, so technically
you're
I am
invited to
invited.
that.
I just can't be on.
And then
That's
you
right.
have to leave.
I feel left out. I didn't do a murder case. I did a...
I think it's probably good that you didn't do a murder
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Switch it up a little
Balances
bit.
it out.
Do you want to come on some other time and do a
murder case? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, all right. Well, think about what, a murder case you're really a big fan of.
We should do a clown themed.
Oh, God.
Let's
That
go
would
to
be
court.
fun.
Yeah.
Surely some clowns have gone to court.
Gacy.
Oh, John Wayne
John
Gacy.
Wayne
He was a
Gacy.
clown. That's right.
Yeah, he's a creepy ass fucking clown.
That might be the number one clown case.
Oh, yeah, for
Should
sure.
we start doing themed episodes more?
You totally
Hey,
should.
if you like the idea of us doing a themed episode, stop by our Facebook page.
Facebook.com/gaming historian. And talk about your favorite themes.
Stop by our Facebook page. Tweet us at Let's Go 2 Court. Check out our Instagram. Leave us a comment at LGTC Podcast or send us over an email at lgtcpodcast@gmail.com and suggest some themes. Maybe we'll go somewhere with
I'm
this
digging
theme
the clown
idea.
theme.
I like the clown theme too. And also,
I don't
if you're...
mind the clown theme. If I could talk about a shitty ass clown, I'd do that.
By the way, Brandi, I've been lobbying for you all to talk about the man at the Royals game that got hit
I know.
hit in the eye with a hot dog. So if you ever have a baseball themed episode or a hot dog themed, like when food items attack.
When food items, I think I've seen that show.
Surely there's been a lot of court cases with food.
Sure.
Yeah.
So have me on for that one because I do love some food.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll talk about the hot dog in the eye guy.
No, I'm
You
going to
look
talk about
so
it.
excited.
It's one of the funniest cases I've ever read about.
Well, don't spoil it.
Yeah.
No, I won't. I'll save it for the episode.
Anyway,
If you enjoyed the podcast, please do us a huge favor. Tell your friends.
yes, just, like one person.
I'll tell my
tell one
friends.
person.
Just tell 100 people.
Yeah.
That's all we ask. That
One-
you make a sandwich
Yeah,
board.
1 or 100 people.
Norman.
Norman, are you going to tell people? about
Yeah, I'm going
this
to share
podcast?
this out
Okay.
Excellent.
to my millions of followers.
Anyway, join us next week.
When we'll be experts on 2 whole new topics.
Podcast adjourned.
And now for a note about our process. I read a bunch of stuff, then regurgitate it all back up in my very limited vocabulary.
And I copy and paste from the best sources on the web, and sometimes Wikipedia.
So we owe a huge thank you to the real experts. For this episode, I got my info from Kotaku, CBS News, and People magazine.
And I got my info from articles for CBS News, The Plain Dealer, and The Morning Journal.
And I got my info from the book Game Over by David Sheff, the New York Times, and the University of Wisconsin La Crosse Library.
For a full list of our sources, visit lgtcpodcast.com.
Any errors are, of course, ours, but please don't take our word for it. Go read their stuff.